All right, welcome to the Focus Podcast. We got a special guest here today. We got Brian Morgan.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me. So
or should I say focus? What do you prefer?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I don't care. It go either way.
The stage persona.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're just chilling here.
Yeah.
So we were talking a lot about before we started rolling about publishing, about artists got shitty deals, and so as I left off, we were kind of speaking about publishing, and distribution. So basically, you went with CD Baby,
Yeah.
and so what they do is they put out to all the streaming services, and that's like your master. So your master is like the completed project, and you get royalties just from owning the master. So basically every stream, as long as you own it, it's coming to you 100%. So they maybe get a cut. They probably get 10%. I know DistroKid doesn't keep much, but there's still like a little fee there. And then I've gone with Indie Pool for my first two albums, and they're Toronto one, just because if you make a certain amount, then there's taxes, and then there's tax on tax. So I just wanted to keep it strictly Canadian. So it's just in Canadian dollars and just like doesn't go through a US distributor, you know? And the thing I like about Indie Pool, shout out to Indie Pool, is they have actual people working. So I can message the guys and be like, hey, can you help me with this? And they'll get on it right away. So there's way more customer service, as CDBB used to have good customer service, but I think it's all automated now. So the problem is like, yes, it's good. They don't take a lot of percentage off, but they also, there's no way of getting a hold of anybody. Like DistroKid is brutally frustrating when you want something changed, to try and go through all their AI bots and their chats and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's the master component of your revenue, and then it breaks down into two components. So the after, like, branching out from the master, you have the composition, and then you have publishing. So the composition part is basically like your instrumental, who owns it, and then who contributed to it. So there's the full ownership of just your instrumental, and then they're like broken down of like, that's a whole other category of like percentages, who did what and who did how much, you know. And then you have the other side of the coin is publishing, and then there's two entities to that. There's performance, so you could perform it and only get those royalties. And then there's who owns the publishing, is like who wrote it. And then that's a whole other category too, of like writing percentages, you know, that can get really sticky too, especially with bands. So
That's right.
Yeah,
so I remember filling out those online forms with SOCAN that ask those kinds of questions, co-writers, performances, recording, things like that. So
you're breaking down your composition. So basically, you want, before I contacted SOCAN, and I want to get like an actual SOCAN person. I might get like a SOCAN person to come in and do like a podcast interview.
That's a great
and really
great
explain publishing, you know.
Yep.
But from my understanding, it's basically like what you want to do is you want to get your SOCAN first before you do anything, even before you're almost close to you have to have your album complete the way you want it, mastered and all that stuff. Once that's done, you want SOCAN first, and they give you the ISWC codes, and those are your instrumental codes. Those are like what's really gonna give you your bread and butter money. And then once you have those, some people, when they upload the CD Baby and DistroKid, they just let them generate an ISRC code for you, but you can generate your own ISRC code, which is basically like tracks all your music, and that's for your masters basically. So basically, you can get one. You register and you get one. It's accordance to your country. So mine starts with CA. And then what you do is each time you upload music, this is your code. So basically, the code works with the year. So the beginning of the code is the year 2024, and then all these zeros, and you start with 1, like whatever music you release in that year. So, and then the next year you do a different one, 2025, and then on and then on. So then that helps find your song online, and then with your name and the title of your track, those 3 things kind of triangulate, and that's how these entities are able to find
when it finds your song online, is it searching all the platforms that are out there? So each time it's being played, that code that you're mentioning will...
And it'll know where it's coming from.
Where it's coming from, okay, yeah.
So those 3 things, like the chances of like somebody having the same... Because a lot of people have the same artist name, but the same artist name and a song title, the exact same thing, is like 1 in a billion. So it's very... Even so, if that does happen, then you have your own specific code that identifies you and your country, and then that's easy way for it to find out. Exactly. So is this your first time putting it online? Like, you already put one out? You said you put a song out already?
In the 90s, I was in a band called Jughead that did a lot of playing. We put out 3 CDs and a DVD at a time where DVDs weren't really happening that much. So, and we did cross-country tours, a lot of festivals. And so it was a different kind of, the 90s was a different kind of way of promoting music. So it was easy to get media publicity, easy to get some airplay.
Yeah.
We did some TV shows. And so having that experience and coming at it now, I released my album, The Curve of the Earth, in December 2022, and it just all these things that you're talking about now, this distribution systems, the algorithms of determining how many plays, and then we were talking about how poorly paid artists are for play. So I came at it really uninformed about what the whole thing's like. I still had the mindset of what it was like in the 1990s to release an album.
Yeah.
And the biggest difference I noticed, how much easier it was to get attention. I think the comparison of the number of releases back then, the kind of barriers and gatekeepers of getting your music out and getting media publicity versus now, it's easier to make an album now, the cost of it, because a lot of it can be done on home recording equipment. But getting attention and getting heard and all the kinds of crazy people out there offering to increase your playlist, which looks like such a scam.
They're all scams.
Oh my God!
From experience, they're all fucking scams.
And then you hear about people, and then all the contests. That's the other scam out there,
Yeah.
where you pay money to enter a contest for.
I'll tell you one thing from experience: never pay for any of that shit. Ever. Anybody, even you can get fooled by they'll do numbers for you at first.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, yeah, throw me $10 and you'll get numbers, right?
There's probably bots or something.
Yeah, more than likely. Bots, and the way it's done is one email can create a bunch of different platforms. So people run up computers. They have computers in the room and they have cell phones lined up. It's like called cell phone mining.
Yeah.
Basically. So but the algorithm's so smart now, like YouTube and Spotify, they know that these things happen. So you'll get the numbers and then you'll see them disappear weeks after because Spotify will know that these are fake, right? Mm-hmm. So I've had numbers and they've just completely gone. And they're bonkers numbers. They're like 6,000 plays in an hour and in like a day. So you're like, there's no way this is going to happen. So real organic way of doing it is good. There's so many things you touched on there that I can relate to because I'm 45 and I call myself the half and half. For the mid 40s, we're the half and half people, because half my life was pre-internet and post is after internet. And when I went to school in 1999 for television production. We were the last year of analog and the first year of digital. So we were literally the crossover year. And when I was in school, it was Napster came out. And so
God, Napster.
Instantly the change to make stuff was so much easier. And I wrote this article for a rock magazine actually a few years ago about the difference of making music in the 90s or late 90s to now. And it's interesting because yes, there's a million ways to make music now, and it's so fast and quick and easy, but I feel like people are bringing less creativity to the board. You know what I mean? Like, it's when you had to go to a studio, you had all week to wait for it. Like Friday we're going to the studio, and then you had all these ideas you brought with it, and then now it's like it's all accessible all the time now. I feel like there's not enough creativity, and like a lot of people are just carbon copying each other with certain styles and looks. And even like I wanted to touch on what you said about making an album. It's so different because I got in the era of first digital programs, but we still like used a CD player to upload stuff to get it on digital platform. And now it's just like you can make a song and Spotify or DistroKid will master it as well. I find a lot of that stuff is over compressed, so it's all for like listening on your phone device basically. So yes, it's convenient, but it's also like you're missing a lot of the steps that make it a great album or a unique album or your sound, you know? So I feel like there's a lot of that missing nowadays. But I had my last guest, he's 25 years old, and he's like, oh, I'll buy a tape, I'll buy this. And I'm like, you're the generation that's had nothing to hold. Like, you guys that you like now you can buy anything you want now, but there was no era of like for them for CDs or tapes or
a beautiful
vinyl or anything.
Beautiful album with liner notes and side liner. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I mentioned my 1990s, and there's a gap there. So I had a career as an academic, and I worked in literacies and critical literacies and media literacy. Especially in additional languages. And the same thing has happened with academic publishing, what you've described as this kind of acceleration of production. And what people often describe as an attention economy. So there are a lot of activities to try to get people's attention within a marketplace that's incredibly crowded. And so what it does is accelerate the repetition of things. So you when you get too many people trying to produce things too quickly, you don't really have the kind of care that you were talking about, the thoughtfulness, the time to go back and really work on making these tracks, because you're constantly trying to put something new. We were talking about your YouTube channel, attracting people. There's
content.
This culture of the new, this accelerated production. So accelerated production processes in all kinds of forms of information and media, it's a real problem. And so you see it in the newspaper business and media, how there's little time or money spent on thoughtful, careful analysis of what's happening.
Twitter did a lot of that by basically, it's like, here's the tweet. And let's run off that.
And so I was talking to someone last night who used to work in newspaper business.
Gotcha.
And in my hometown, I'm originally from Regina, and she at one point worked for the Regina newspaper, and she talked about, and she's I think she's probably in her 70s, talked about how these news desks that used to have independent people covering local topics are gone. It's all like one central distribution. Scary, and there's little time or money spent on detailed, really looking into issues. you get opinion. So you turn on TV, and you work in TV media too. It's
Which
often
is the opposite of journalism.
That's
Opinions is the opposite of journalism. I
people
don't
with
want
just
your fucking
talking
opinion.
heads, and that's all you get.
Yeah, yeah.
You'll be sitting around, there'll be 4 people and a commentator just asking for opinions.
Yeah.
So the parallel in music is very similar. It's the
Great point.
rehashing. So you see this across, and so there's the economy of it is constantly cutting costs, making more profit.
Yeah.
Shortchanging the public.
Yep.
And like you say,
the creator. Really short.
It's right. It's like
creator.
That's right. It's like being like slave labor again, digital slave
Yeah,
labor.
I love that term. Yeah, no.
The digital proletariat.
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
It's so it's funny, and so there's this obsession with, like you say, getting content out.
Yeah.
And then there's more and more tools to accelerate production, but then the acceleration also means it tends to push the production, the output, into similar sounds, because there's no one really learning the craft of creating. They'll go for a shortcut.
No, I agree 100% what you say,
and the sad thing too, is I also see the art of live performance, and because we've played together live, and you do a lot of live playing, and I do too. I find it's hard getting people out now to experience that unique thing of a live performance or a live recording.
Because everybody's been conditioned for the short versions.
And they're conditioned to the sounds of that accelerated, quick production. They don't have that sense of the uniqueness of the performance of the audience. And like when you get up, and when we did last Thursday, you don't know where that's going to go. But what an exhilarating feeling that is.
That's the fun.
It's the magic of it.
Yeah.
So where's this going to go, and you're part of it. And it's very communal, where a lot of the recording is not. The individual is kind of separate, and it's machines generating a lot of the sounds. So. But that kind of live moment where you and the audience, and suddenly you just can feel it. This is magical, which is kind of what music was intended to be.
The beginning of it. It is magic because it's something.
Yeah. It was made to be played live with people.
Well, music more than anything is magic because it's something that we can see and hear that is from nothing. Really, it's created from nothing, but it's more an inner thing. Yeah. It's like translating something that's inner into something audible that people can share and feel. It's like an entity that we all know that it's around us. It's just, I love what you said about the news. And my friend Sule, he has this term, I can't remember what it is, but it's like hyper consumption. That's what it is. Hyper consumption. And he's like, that's what it is. It's just foop, 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 foop. I catch myself too. I'm no better.
And low attention.
I'm no better, and I just flip through the shorts in YouTube. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm no better too. Yeah. But I understand what you say, and it's like, our minds have been shaped into that. So it's like it is hard for people to sit and see the long play of your music. And it's translated into, like, everybody's had to adapt. Comics had to adapt for, it was the short clips for them. That was a new thing.
Yeah.
For them.
And what's the average TikTok thing? How many seconds are these?
They're like 15 seconds.
Yeah. So this has become the attention span.
So I have a
imagine the whole theory of like being a teacher and working in that.
Good luck.
Because your parents and that whole generation say, well, you had to be in a classroom for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Well, kids have no 6-hour attention, but they're conditioned 15 seconds and boom, give me something new and exciting.
Yeah, well, that's the way we're all conditioned now, too. It's like, even adults are like, we've become like that, too. It's just like, just firing off. Well, I started in news, actually. I was a news camera operator when I was 21. So it was...
where did you start?
Rogers in Richmond Hill. So I worked out of the first local there, and it was like, car accidents, fucking talking to sleazy politicians all day, just the dirtiest, like, news, grimy news. And it was right around, literally I worked right after 9/11. And so it was October 2001, I really started working there. So when I got into the news, it was that crazy hysteria on the, what was the anthrax? All the anthrax. I remember everything was a bomb scare. Every package was like.
Oh yeah.
Remember people were
right,
paranoid about opening packages.
Yeah.
There's a mysterious package.
Yeah.
So I saw news changing instantly as soon as I got into it, right? And like, oh, here we go. And then I started thinking like, okay, this is we're getting into a mode of hyper acceleration news, and everything changed like that. Music, everything you consumed, everything is hyper now. And I think that's the problem with a lot of media, is like it gets out so fast before anything is even critically analyzed, or like from a journalistic point of view. And I like what you said, opinions. It's all opinions now. So everybody's polarized into these categories now because you have an opinion. You sway with this opinion or that opinion, instead of just like real journalism that I kind of saw at the end, like where you do your research. And your journalism is supposed to be a neutral point of view. There's supposed to be you're supposed to be like, here's what you're seeing, you decide, like Viewer's supposed to figure it out on their own. But now, like you said, it's all this, panel discussion. We have these, and even like we can go into depths of that too. Like depending on who your target audience is, they can set up specific type of people to cater to their show style. Like, I know CNN back in the day used to put on people that were of the opposite party, and they would just have like buffoons on that would, argue the other side. So it was almost like setting the viewer up to be like, oh yeah, I disagree with that person, and I'm really frustrated with Canada because it's like when I was into news, it was all local. It was all local stuff, and you got real stories out of local news channels. And now with Rogers, which was really shitty too, is they've gone so corporate that they've totally abandoned the community television, which is what their whole basis was built off of. Rogers was built off volunteer work. Like the reason why they're so strong now is because they years and hours of volunteers doing all their productions for free. But there's a trade-off. You learned a lot. Like you learned a lot of the gear, how production was done, teamwork, community, all this stuff. You got great knowledge from just being involved. Now it's all gone. It's completely gone. So it's basically the generation is learning off YouTube, all these other entities to build their own experience. You know what I mean? So where do you go now when you're a kid? You have to buy shit now or know somebody what they're doing. But it's like, at least when I grew up in the 90s, there was a lot of entities like that would support. Even in the city, there was a place called Lyft, and they provided a lot of cheap gear, and all you had to do was like volunteer for them for a week or something. There's not a lot of stuff like that anymore now. So it's a lot of competitive mentality now, especially with kids coming out. Yeah. And it's interesting time now because you have the YouTube stars now. There are people that make a lot of dough off this, but it's few and far between. So it's like people see that and they're like, oh, I got to instantly get to that step there but they don't see all the other steps they've had to get there of learning curves and stuff like that. So it's tough for music because music drives everything pretty much. Music is the center point of everything. Without music, it's kind of dull. Everything's dull. Music. TV.
That's because you and I are
yeah,
musicians.
We're trying to pump it up more.
We're a little biased here.
We're 100% biased. But
I think, we're a little partial to music. Yeah, it's a funny world nowadays.
Yeah.
And I find that in terms of news, like you're saying, it's that again, trying to get attention is that the more shrill and outrageous you are, the more
first.
the more attention you're going to get.
Yeah.
And because it's not necessarily on whether you're telling any kind of truth, it's just, are you offensive enough that people are going to listen to and watch you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what's happened now. So you have more polarized media. There's no fact checking of anything, or we have our fact checkers and you'll have yours, and
Which is
just
scary
a lot
for
of
Canada.
screaming. It's scary for the whole world. People have lost that ability to empathize with or even hear ideas that are different from what they're used to.
Exactly.
And
the technology is almost catered to your mindset. It just keeps you in that.
That's right. In the
polarization.
old days, when we had journalism, like you said, there were only a few channels, and the mandate was, the ideal is that you presented all sides of a situation, and you educated your public to be able to make decisions and discern between what they see as right and wrong, or what reflects their own realities. But I don't even think schools prepare kids like that anymore. But
no, and for my opinion, not even.
I was going to say. Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll say the parallels in music. I wonder because it's so easy now just to listen to one kind of music. Yes. There's so much of it. Where in my day, you turn on like a CBC, and over the course of a week, you'd be exposed to country and western shows like Don Messer and his Islanders. But you'd also be exposed to really interesting jazz, and rock shows. So you suddenly were exposed to things that pushed you out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, there's just so much within a narrow kind of fortress of the familiar that there's no need to even learn or have to be exposed to something that's outside your norm. And that's unfortunate because you're not learning. You miss out.
You miss out. And the worst is missing out on the unknown.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real tragedy because it's I've discovered so much music by accident. Going somewhere or just leaving something on by accident. And it's ooh, I didn't even know I liked that. And then I know
later going,
that's cool.
That's something I'm going to listen to and maybe add to my own stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I was explaining to the youngster who was here last week. I was like, there's no anticipation anymore because even I got the last of it was, HMV had New Music Tuesdays. So I'd just go. And
there'd be a band playing.
Yeah, and then
I remember
the band outside, and then you go in and you're like, oh shit, there's a whole fuckload of new releases today that I had no idea.
Yeah.
And then it's I'm gonna take that band and that band. But I'm sure there's platforms like that now, but it's everything is online. There's no physical world where you can immerse yourself in that and discover something else completely different.
Yeah. That reminds me of something interesting. I was watching a documentary or docudrama. So it's about Leonard Cohen's early days. It's on one of the streaming channels, and it's something about him and Marianne. So when he was on the island of Hydra and he meets the woman who's infamously named in So Long Marianne. Anyways, it was an interesting time. So I remember traveling at a time where you would go somewhere and you would have to learn to fit in there. You'd have to learn a little bit of the language. You'd have to eat their food. You'd have to listen to their music. Yeah. So, of course, in the movie, they're going to the local taverna. They're drinking, the Retsina wine and the Ouzo, and they're dancing to bouzouki. And so I still remember backpacking in the 80s around Africa, and you really, in those days, again, you had to be exposed and learn to adapt as part of traveling through the world. And nowadays, you go anywhere, people speak English. There's going to be a McDonald's. There's going to be a Starbucks.
Americanized, very Americanized.
There'll be a bank machine that you can put your card in anywhere in the world, and it'll give you the local currency. You don't have to negotiate anything.
No.
You don't have to step outside of too much comfort and familiarity. And so those kinds of intercultural skills of learning to expose yourself, they're disappearing. This is kind of what globalization has done.
Yeah.
And I think it affects the music business too.
It affects all creativity.
So you get the same kind of music being recorded and played probably globally, or we hear only the same thing.
And that's why
same pop music all over the world.
Well, people complain, they're like, "What? There's no good artists," and it's like that's what the outcome is, really.
Yeah.
And I remember in the '90s, like a lot of artists were their own thing, like they had their own identity. Now I feel it's like a very
heaven forbid
close carbon copy, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, nothing against Drake, but it's like there's a million artists in Toronto that are like just like Drake, or just like The Weeknd, or just like this, and it's like that's exactly, I like what you said. It's like nobody's willing to risk jumping out of their own comfort zone, and that's what's leading AI too, right? Because it's like, oh, just make me a beat like that or a song like that that's doing well, and I'm gonna ride that wave and get just gratification out of that. But at the end of the day, you don't get any gratification because it's not something you took a risk on or tried different, or it's uniquely you. You know what I mean? So it's like that's when a lot of these, you find a lot of these artists just fizzle out because there's no traction there. Mm. There's no originality. There's no uniqueness. There's no profound you know. Mm. So and I got lucky because I went around Europe a lot in my 30s, and like you said, I got exposed to a lot of other cultures and how open mics were done and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I'm soaking it in, I'm like getting to it the way they do it, and then I'll take that into my repertoire. And it's like, I went to Barbados, and I always look for open mics, and I found one at a Holiday Inn, and it was just like, the guys, they played like a really slower, laid back tempo, and I was like, okay, I switched my lyrics to accommodate that style, right? I wasn't gonna go up to them and say, play it like this, Mm-hmm. And I was just like, what's your local style? And I'm gonna adapt to your local style. And I don't think, and that's a risk, because it's like, it might not work. I might fuck up on stage, and which I've done a lot. And I'm not afraid of that. So I think that's like the best part of growth as an artist, is not being afraid to mess up,
do some risk
in front
taking.
of people.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So where have you been? You've been around a lot. You went to Africa a lot. So you traveled.
Yeah. So, and I traveled with the first trip was with the violin. So I had spent 2 years. Well, I spent several years playing in bar bands around the country, and mostly out west, and then eventually in Toronto. Then I decided to go to the York Jazz program, a music program. And after a couple of years, I just had the travel bug again. So I had an open 1-year ticket from, I think, Montreal to Amsterdam, and I think about $1,500 traveler's checks.
Wow.
And it just kept going, and I remember working on a movie set as an extra in Athens, in Piraeus, and in November, a couple of the extras say, what are you doing after this? Do you want to travel, want to go to Cairo? Do you want to go to Africa? So I ended up spending 4 months doing that, and then ran out of money, ended up getting a ticket, borrowed some money from my dad, got back into ended up flying Aeroflot to Munich.
Oh wow!
And I'm in the youth hostel with my violin, and some guy says, "Oh, you got to go down the Marienplatz and play your violin." And I'm thinking, okay. Anyway, so I go down there, and I made about 40 or 50 marks in 1980 money. So I went, oh my God! So I ended up spending 4 months staying in Munich playing. And then I met some young people say, stay with us. We know a bar you can play in. So I was playing guitar and violin in this club and going down into the...
Germany's great.
It was great.
Yeah.
And, so I spent that time in Munich, and it was fabulous. But what an experience. And then came back, decided to finish off my degree, combine musicology and anthropology. And then now my wife and I, at the time we weren't married, decided to do it again and travel. Open 1-year ticket, and ended up working, playing a bar in Crete, in Heraklion for a month.
Wow.
A couple months. And then we ended up on a kibbutz in Israel, and then we just kept going around, ended up living in a place called Bodrum in Turkey, where I got a job playing cocktail hours at the bar in Bodrum and teaching tennis in the morning.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the highlight of that trip was I got to play a banquet party for Ahmet Ertegun of Atlantic Records, who had a place in Bodrum.
Get out.
Yeah, so I got to meet him and play some music for him. That was kind of a fun little experience. And so different trips. And then we came back within a couple of years. Someone from the university said, "You want to go to China?" And I wasn't doing anything. And he said, "If you want to go to teach English there, we'll put you through George Brown College for a year and you get a certificate in English teaching." And so I spent a year in China, out of which that album came out, because they had a new recording studio. It was 87, 88, and they were opening up and getting a lot of technology from the West and media stuff. And this local radio station had this fabulous 24-track studio. So I got in there, started meeting musicians by myself. So 2 of the songs on the album are from there.
This is your previously released album or your new one?
This is the new one because, it's a long story. I didn't release it when it was done.
Get into it, yeah.
So the album was actually finished in 92, 93.
Gotcha.
But at that time, I had joined this band, Jughead, that was just so busy. I joined them just near the end of recording our first CD. We went on to do 2 more CDs, lots of live playing, a lot of matinees at the Horseshoe,
Love it.
El Macombo, Black Bull, which is no more.
Yeah, sadly gone.
And then we did a lot of music festivals that we played around the country. And I realized it wasn't going to be the time to promote this kind of independent album.
Yeah.
So it just kind of, I had the final masters in DAT, just kind of filed it away, was really busy with the band. Then I ended up deciding to, at that time, go back to grad school because I thought, this teaching is a great supplementary income. And I ended up going back, really liking the experience, the work with ideas, ended up doing a PhD at OISE. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of what happened. So did that for a long time, came back out of teaching in about 2020, and I thought, I still have this album and there's some really neat experiences in it. Yeah. Why not release it now?
Yeah.
Because there's some interesting stories on there I'd like to talk about. And that was what I did. I ended up getting a few things done to the sound of it slightly, putting it into WAV file form, getting a distributor, and just realizing the and learning, as we've been talking about, the nature of releasing an album now compared to the 90s is so completely different. So
yeah, no, that's an amazing experience. And what I'm finding a lot is, people with your experience and who did it all before the digital era are like, wait a minute, I have all this awesome stuff. And it's like, now I have this opportunity to release it to the world like no other way I did before.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. And I got into something with an artist. There was a band named Focused. So they're a Christian rock band from like Sacramento or something, or near that area. And they had done a few albums in the 90s. So I think I was one of the first to have that name Focus locked down in like most of the streaming services. And then they decided, I think they decided to join the streaming world as well. So what happened is that when your thing gets distributed, like I said, when like distribution ones like DistroKid are all AI based, it mixed my shit with theirs.
Oh, jeez.
So it was a nightmare. So like I had almost every one was mixed up. Every single one was mixed up. Spotify and Apple were easy to sort out because they have good customer service, but you have to go through each of them to separate it. And with YouTube, it was a nightmare for me. So the guys at Indie Pool did it for me like in a day, because they do that type of stuff every day. So that's another advantage to having this smaller distributor. There's TuneCore as well, and there's one in Quebec too that my friend told me about. But that's, to me, through experience, to have a local one is good because you can have customer service more. But CD Baby and DistroKid are like a more global one.
So let me ask you, again, it changed from the 90s. It was always conceptualizing and putting out an album.
Yeah.
So I hear from people now that it's more a case of, I see people putting out singles. So again, we were talking about attention.
Yeah, well, that adds up to everything we were talking about.
And I see now this kind of the serial, here's my single, maybe a month later, here's another single.
Well, it's the way it's what basically fueled it, in my opinion. There's a few factors. Like, the first major factor was the MP3 players. Basically, people wanting to make their own playlists all the time. So that's where Spotify grew big, because they were the first to like put playlists together, And then the other thing that's the factor is the short attention span, and then the less creativity. There's a lot of components that go into it. But what I'm finding is that we're kind of coming out of that phase. And to me, I think it's like also feeding the algorithm. So if you put out an album every 2-3 years, it's hard to maintain that algorithm and keep feeding the AI to whatever program you are. So basically, it's working with that technology. I think that's why the single trend came out so strong and works so well, is because if you have 36 songs and you release one once a month, that is gonna trigger that algorithm constantly, and you have constant attention from your subscribers or who you're listening to your music, right? But to me, I'm still an album person because I still want a full story.
Yeah.
No, so what I've done is like, here's the album, and I'm still like the 90s mentality of like single with a video and then single. But what I've learned is that you can use so much with just one piece of content. That's the thing, is it's like spoon feeding your audience now. So basically what you want to do is like have a music video that comes out, but then you have a whole bunch of clips from that same one music video that you're distributing to all these short attention span videos, To me, an album is still important. I think it's like important in a creative way and important in a growth way as an artist. So I've stuck to the album thing. Like, I've got dragged down in the quicksand with it. So, and I've worked with other younger artists where their single mentality kind of worked for a while, but now they have appreciation for what I've done. Is like, I stick to my album. So, and to me, it's like a progression thing. Like, these are 7 songs from 15 years ago. I'm not the same as that person 15 years ago. It's a progression. To me, it's like like a maturity thing. Each album you make is completely you're a different presentation of yourself each time you do that, right? Whereas I think with the single mentality, there's not really a lot of growth with that. You might have the gradual growth, but I think there's a bigger growth with. And to me, like, an album is just so much more enjoyable, because I don't listen to a lot of I don't listen to a lot of music when I travel, because I work with a lot of headsets. I don't need to hear it all the time. But I think, it's people's lifestyle too. Kind of plays into it too. That just put songs on shuffle, and it's also like the way we consume media too. It's just like next. So, and when finally people hear a real full album, it does blow up. Like you see an artist who puts out a really good full album, it blows up if they they have the right team behind them as well too. I think an album is like the concept of full albums coming back, because there's, like I said before, there was a whole generation of kids that never had anything nostalgic and nothing like to hold physical wise. Like, so now they want full albums that they're like, I bought this whole album. That's why I think vinyl has a resurgence as well too. It's like, I got the whole album, instead of like, oh, I just looked at their single, there's more of so there's more of like a connection to your fans now, your own group of fans, your personalized fans. So I think I've been repeating this each time, each podcast, and I think it's the now is for indie musicians. You're not going to see a label in 10 years. There's not going to be a label anymore. The only thing the label's going to be good for is like distribution deals mixed with them. That's all they are good
Unhappy executives.
That's all they're good for, honestly. I think you don't need the label anymore, because it's like the label really is just middleman.
Yeah.
If you have a good team of people, you need just a good publisher, good social media person, good AV, like a couple AV people, good camera operator, good editor, somebody that's going to pump out stuff, help you with your schedule. You really need a team of like half a dozen people that are really good at what they do, and you could have a solid label. You are the label. So basically it's like, the way I look at it is 10 years ago, comedians, they needed to be on Johnny Carson or whatever, or like Letterman or something, or had to have a sitcom. That was the only way for them to blow up, make money, make a living, So they needed those avenues. They needed Just for Laughs in Montreal. Like, that was the only way to go through to be seen, Yeah. Nowadays, they don't need that, because they built the podcasts with each other. They go on each other's podcasts, and what that helped them is get fans on the road. So basically it's like they've got their own audience now that listens to their podcasts, watch. And the cool thing about YouTube, it really helped comedians, like guys like Bill Burr, who traveled a lot. They started documenting what happens on the road with them. So that's the content that we're feeding. So now Just for Laughs is gone from Montreal. It's not even needed anymore. You don't need a lot of these sitcoms. The only way you were going to really know a comic was through a sitcom. Now you don't need to go that avenue anymore. A lot of them are making a killing just by exposure on YouTube alone. And I think now, 15 years later, the technology is primed for the indie musician. Everything's ready. It's like what Napster was meant for 20 years ago. Now the tools are here for... And you see it all the time. Like, I don't know if you saw this one country guy. The blonde guy. He's got the blonde, like he's got a red beard, and he was just pulled over, and he recorded himself on the phone. It was like this real emotional performance, and he posted it, and it just went crazy viral. And all his music went through the roof, and he owned it, all of his stuff, so he's making bank. And then all these record labels came and offered him all this shit, and he's like, I'm good, I own all this stuff. So yeah. I think everything's prime for an indie musician to be self-reliant, self-dependent. Also, like I said, I was touching on all this publishing stuff. So many artists are totally unaware of like what's at their fingertips, what they can own. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of artists that know much about publishing. I know a little bit, but that's just the surface. There's so much branches out to to what you can make. Like, and you see these artists, these young rappers making money on YouTube. They're making bank. They're really making bank because they've owned their stuff. But then you see on the other side of it, like we said, with artists getting fucked over, it's like those artists that have to split those deals. They're the ones that are getting screwed. Like, I sat down with Sony a few years ago, and they wanted to have an 8-year deal with me for Spotify, and they were going to take 50% of my Spotify. So I'm like, wait a minute. When it's off and running, and I don't need you guys, it's like I still have to give you 50%, and it's like, so there's a lot of deals like that are appealing, but at the end of the day, you might be forking out money for somebody that's doing nothing, really. So I'd rather own it all and not make much than, half of it go to somebody else who's really not doing anything for me. But I know people who have gotten major deals with Universal, and they had to pay out of their pocket for production, and they have to split
the royalties,
big percentages with the label.
Yeah. But
that's the price you pay, but you have to negotiate your own way too. So there's like, and even I talked to him, he's like getting out of that a lot, but he still has this deal with the label, but he's booking a lot of his own shows, doing a lot of his own groundwork, right? Because if like you use the labels people, it's like it's coming out of your pocket too. And but there's also like, you see a lot of numbers online, and a lot of that is fake. Like, a lot of people pay for that generation of
an
views and audience, and
that's kind of sleazy.
Yeah. Well, it happens a lot in hip hop too, where you see like somebody on Instagram have 10,000 followers. It's just like a few accounts that have like 30 different accounts, and so I've gone through a lot of trial and error with people trying to boast your views and your followers and that.
Price.
It's a lot of scamming. It's so there's a lot to learn. There's so much to learn, and the more you know, the more you're gonna have an opportunity to sell your own music by yourself. There's what's meta something, I can't remember. It's like a database. You can put it through DistroKid or any of these other ones too, and basically it's like a database for people, like entities like Netflix and all these places. They go into a catalog and they look at all this music that's been put out, and then they'll either contact you if they want it. So if that's the other thing that's misleading too, they'll offer you like $300-400 for a buyout, right? To use your stuff, and you're like, oh, that's fucking awesome. But then you see it on a show at Netflix, and it's probably going to generate a couple grand, right? Like, I have a friend that I met in Portland, Oregon, and he's from Arizona. He got one of his songs picked up for Monday Night Football. So he's like, fuck yeah. And they gave him like $2,000. So he was like, yeah, $2,000. But they bought him out with that $2,000. They used that track like almost all year. And it's like, imagine the viewership on Monday Night Football.
Imagine.
And then,
that's awful.
Like
$2,000.
BMI, because he's American, he'd have BMI and ASCAP, which are the back door that'll get you your instrumental. That's like our SOCAN. And that's where the big money is. It's like you're registered with those, and it goes on a broadcast. It's like, that's the fucking bank. You're going to get big time money from that, but then you don't, sometimes it's vague, right? And they're like, here's money for this. We just want to use it. They might not tell you what entity it's for, so it's like up to you to pry and like get that information and negotiate, right? So it's like, if you want, if you need the $200 up front, and it's like most of the time it's like a great deal, but you never know. It just take the fuck off, and it's like, shit, fuck, my song's used for a Nissan commercial. What the fuck?
Oh, God. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So
you released that album, and then so you have a new one coming out.
I'm working on some recording now.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's what the conversation about the single versus the album. So I like the idea of albums too. I like the album that I put out. It fits a whole conceptual unity, and like you were saying, producing it, thinking about the sequence of the story.
Yeah.
So it progressed that way, and so I'm kind of used to that mindset of an album telling a coherent story about something or somewhere in your life. So I'm tempted to put out another album. I've got to get to do some more recording. I've been pretty slow on the recording side of it. I've got a couple songs near completion, and again, the other thing is to think about how many songs do I need to make for an album these days. Yeah.
Well, that's even getting shorter too, because people
Yeah,
put out
that's
an
right.
album. I'm like, that's an EP.
That's
It's
right.
not an album. It is technically an album. It's like people will put out a 4-track album
And call it an album.
and I'm
yeah.
like, that's a demo EP.
That's right,
We
4
used to
songs.
call that a demo back in the day.
Yeah, that's
4 songs is demo, and
Yeah.
then 6 is EP, and then anything I think past 9 is an LP. But yeah, that's the misleading thing too. Another thing about misconception of things with rap, people say freestyling a lot, but it's what they've memorized. That's not freestyling. Freestyling is like something you're just creating out of the air on top of your head. So memorization is different. Like you've memorized your one song that you're just going to all the media outlets with. But that's another different. And then there's like a whole generation of kids that just read off their phone, which is, to me, that's just like, you're not gaining anything. You're not taking risk. You're not taking it. You're being very safe with a lot of stuff, right? So that's where I think, people fall in the trap of like being like this artist or being like that artist. So it's really up to the individual. How authentic do you want to be? And really that's like, it's going to show up in your output, really, I think.
Yeah, and the other that's this idea of authenticity is interesting. So, I love playing live, and so I start to think about, should the recording be closer to what I sound like when I play live?
Yeah.
Versus something that's completely unreproducible in a live setting. So I'm leaning more towards now a sound that reflects what a performance would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm almost thinking I should maybe have a couple of live recordings on an album to be there along with the studio recording stuff. Yeah, so it's the other issue. What do you want the recordings or the album to do for you? Yeah. And for me, it would be to help bring people to live shows too. Yeah, because I love playing live. I'm on the weekend I played 3 gigs. I just love. And the nice thing for me is that I get to be a performer of my own stuff, but I get to be an accompanist, which I really like. So I'll do gigs where I'm just backing someone up on the violin. Mm-hmm. And I find that sense of what the function of an accompanist is helps me as a songwriter. And being a songwriter kind of helps me understand what I should be doing as an accompanist. So one of the compliments I get is that, I really like that you don't play too much, or you know when not to play.
Well, you have an understanding of the lead performer, right?
You have an understanding of what is the purpose. It's to enhance the message of the song. Yeah. The musical message, the lyrical message of the song, the feel of the song is not to have everybody go, holy shit, listen to that solo. No, that's not the function.
It's the compliment.
That's right. And so it's nice having that, to have that kind of balance. I mean, that's why I think some of the best performers have also been like producers and engineers, because they see the creative process from these different creative perspectives of putting together a piece of art. And so that's good. Yeah, and so you have that same kind of synergy as a visual artist because of your work. And you start to see what are what's the imagination or the imaginary of the visual complementing what the audio is. So again, for you, that's probably a really
well. That's different. That's an interesting landscape too, because like I think I brought this up with the last guest that before when you made an album, you used to have to make the front, like artwork. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The front, the back, the
notes.
We called the spine.
Yeah.
Because you had the ones the parts that you fold that are the part you see the skinny part, and then you had the sleeve if it was a fold out or it was a book, and then you had the art within the album and what's going on the disc. So you had all this artwork that revolved around the album, and it complemented the album too.
Told a story.
Exactly. So there was another artistic outlet attached to your album as well. So you had to get pictures done, and pictures had to get developed, and all that nonsense. So I'm glad it's a lot easier now to do stuff like that, way easier. So there's all that involved too. But even myself, I felt like I missed out on that because the last 2 albums I put out were just the cover. So there's no back cover, there's no other art that goes with it, right? So the thumbnail has replaced all the artwork. So the thumbnail is an important piece to distribution when you get out there. But that piece of art is kind of taken over the whole album as an art. And so I guess that's why people like vinyl again too, because there's the back, there's a sleeve, there's credits. And that's what I really, with hip hop especially, I really appreciated the credits. You take it home and you listen to it, and you're like, oh, that person produced that. Because a lot of people who don't want the shine sometimes, that they're still in the credits, but you're like, wow, that guy did that. I know that guy wrote that. She wrote that. She what? Then you see the artist as a with
part of a
more.
team.
Yeah, and also you see that artist as multi-talented. You're like, wow, they're a great performer, but wow, they're a great writer too. They wrote that song for that purpose. So that gives a lot of dynamic to each artist too. So I'm trying to do that too. I help artists write too, that I just want hear my lyrics, and there's so many artistic aspects to just what goes into an album. It's interesting. And I think, but also a lot of video has replaced that album artwork, basically. So video kind of complements a lot of that stuff. It's like when you put out a single, there's so much more video content that you would normally never have before attached to this. So that's what I've learned, is that sometimes it's too much for somebody to consume. You put out a whole album and it's too much for that person to consume. So it's
a commitment of listener time.
And it's also it's also you get more bang for your, you stretch, not water, I don't want to say water it down more, but you stretch each single so much more than you used to. So now what I've done, which is a mix of single and album, is the last one I did, AM Grinding, I put out the papers for 3 months first by itself as a single. And then when I put out the song is titled The Papers. And then when I put out the album, it just joined that single. So it just became part of that single. But the theory is what you're supposed to do. This is the layout. You're supposed to have 3 songs. And this is how publishers work with you too. So you put out 1 song with the video, 3 months, do all the media for it too. Next single, 3rd single. So it's almost 9 months. Then you drop the album. So you get this build up of, through the same media. And then you go after the same radio station. So there's so much money to be had, but it takes a team to help you. So I find nowadays there's a lot of money in radio, and radio is it's a vague category now, because it's like anybody with, OBS or anything like this runs their own radio station off their computer. So it's like you have this the Groove Player, which is like the iTunes for your PC. That's basically like a radio station. So if I put it out on my Facebook and I'm playing your songs, you're gonna get full radio money from SoCan. That's 25 cents a play per song. So that's big money. So that's why a lot of rappers are getting a lot of money, because they submit their music to all these people that have their own YouTube channel. Dude in the basement that plays music videos, all these ones. So that's what you're doing with your publishing, is you're reaching out to these college stations, all these ones that play in your music, and that's where the big money's coming through. Mm-hmm. And then what I've done recently, and a lot of artists done, is just you're mixing that old school with the new school. So when I go into town, I contact a radio station a month in advance and say, hey, I'm coming to town, can I do a radio spot to promote? So radio's making a comeback, because satellite radio, all this stuff, because it's all these people that used to do radio aren't doing it anymore, but it's the same format, and they're just putting it in their living room, same gear. So I found lots of independent radio stations all over Ontario that I did interviews and tons of online. So it's like, and then there's a lot more, they have more freedom of control, as opposed to because Chorus and radio and Rogers own a lot of radio stations, and they have to go by certain mandates and stuff like that, and it's harder to get indie play on those radio stations. But there's so many just small town little stations, and
yeah, interesting. So one of the things I did with the distribution was I went through this thing called Earshot. I don't know if you know about Earshot.
I think so.
Yeah, so Earshot, to kind of consolidate distribution to community and college radio. So you were talking about...
That's huge.
Yeah, so in theory, Earshot sends or notifies... Yeah, so my album is on Earshot.
Yeah, so that's it's basically an inventory for college stations.
That's right, or it's almost like a distributing clearinghouse to these special kind of niche.
We used to get the CD books before.
Yeah, and they say, and some of the radio stations now will say we have no place to archive or put this stuff.
Yeah,
and they just want WAV files or MP3s. So Earshot sends people who sign up, and I think I did pay a fee. Earshot will send you a list of contacts, so you're still in the game. I
have that list. Somebody gave it to me,
and they're updating it. So contacts, radio stations, genre of music they're looking for. And then I find you actually still, it's a lot of work.
It is.
Of just making personal contact with specific, because a lot of these places rely on volunteer DJs. Yeah. And so trying to make that contact with an individual DJ who's probably getting several hundred contacts a day. So, and they're probably, students or God knows what else. It's tough. And I've had occasional few that get back to me.
Yeah. Well, I have a tip. So basically, I got somebody who does logistics in the city here. He does record label logistics stuff. So I paid him a couple $100, and he gave me 2 templates. One was for touring and one was for radio play. So these are email templates basically. So and then he did press kits for me. So he did a radio press kit and then a touring press kit. So with this radio email template, basically what you're saying is you're gonna do the work for them. because that's the biggest problem, is them sifting through the stuff and
Yeah.
where the fuck do I put this song? So what you do, this is what you do. You find their station, you look up their schedule, and you see what part of the schedule your song might fit in. So what I look at is like, oh, they got Hip Hop Drive Home 6 to 8 on Fridays. So this is how you email the guy. You say, and then you can find out who that VJ
they have
is.
the schedules.
So either you email that guy, or you email the program director.
Yeah.
So basically you say, hello, my name is so and so. I'm a musician from Toronto. I was listening to your Friday afternoon drive. Great show. You're kind of brown nosing a bit,
Yeah.
but you're like, great show, and you're like, I think my single will fit in this program. Here's an MP3 of it, because MP3s are great for that. And then you attach your press kit. Too much information in the email is just you need like 2 sentences, and then if you're coming to town, you're like, hey, I got a show coming to. So what it does is it basically shows them that you've paid some attention to their programming, instead of just saying, play my song, I deserve this, and then it shows that you did some research, and it also helps them sort through all the stuff, and they're like, hey, you're right, this song does kind of go with this. So you're kind of helping them do the work for them, and it's nice for them to get emails like that too. They're like, oh, they like my program too. It's the same thing. It's like you're putting out, your platform too, Yeah. So I found it's very rare you get a lot, but my engagement percentage goes up way higher, and you'll get a call back, and you'll get a playback like, oh, you know what, we don't have room for this right now, but we put it in the rotation for later. And there's a lot that I've gotten through too. There's a ton of, and then you build up relationships with them. So the other side of that is it is a lot of work. It's a lot of tedious work. But if you just set aside like an hour or so each week for this to update it, you'll be cruising. And you want like a spreadsheet, like a Excel spreadsheet, and then you get all those radio contacts, and then you're like, you have another line that goes like you do like October 7th, you're like, contacted, check mark, played my song, check mark. So then you can look back and you're like, okay, oh, I've already talked to them a few times, I don't want to bother them again. So then you have an idea of like, because a lot of that stuff, there's been a lot of great programs like MailChimp and stuff like that help you just spam people, but they've seen this so much that they're like, they can tell the patterns of spam, right?
Yeah.
So that's just a tip on like, get yourself a really good email template, and then just kind of do a little bit of research to each place that you're gonna. But this is another thing that AI might be good for, where it's like, get me all the contacts of radio stations in state of Connecticut, blah, blah, blah. And then it just blurts all these out, and then you're like, please attach this email to all these, because it's tedious as fuck, because I've done it to like go through, find all these little, these.
Yeah, so I did it with the Earshot list.
Yeah.
Put together a press release, Earshot stations that are part of the program, and went into the station itself, looked at the broadcast sheet, which shows, what genres, names of DJs, and some got back. Some did get back and played it. Yeah, so it's good.
Once you're in too, and then they know you, and then you keep releasing more signals, and you get a working relationship. But that's another job too. That's like,
it's a time sucker for sure.
Yeah, well, I've been through trials and tribulations of that too. I had a publisher in Montreal that was like, you pay him this money, and then you're like, what are you getting me? Like, I wasn't getting anything out of it, and I was just like, just give me the contacts and I'll email them.
That's right.
I'll fucking do it. But that's the thing. They're like the gatekeeper of these contacts. But now all this stuff is free, and a lot of it's free information now.
Yeah.
So it's really about how organized can you get yourself as an indie artist, and then just kind of prioritizing, like you have to do a lot, just prioritizing in your week, like set aside time for this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm interested to hear how it goes for you, and like down the digital rabbit hole you go, and
thanks for all the advice.
It's my own error. It's all through my error.
It's a real learning
experience.
Yeah,
I got all the scars coming through.
Yeah,
so
well, that's it. So it's much more than just playing the music and writing the music. It's
so much more.
Yeah, it's a real interesting world.
And unfortunately, like, you know, I've been caught up with that in the last 4 years. So it's like, that's what's missing. And then, like you said, playing live is so important. Not only playing live, but getting out there and going to other cities. And I've not completely forgot, but it was like, well, this is what makes your album. This is what makes your album unique, is these experiences. And I'm like, I can't create without these experiences. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was like, there was a 3-year dead end fucking, you know, not like the creativity wasn't there, but it was just like, it was dead, because it's like I had no experiences for 2.5 years. It was just like online, the few places that we could go, you know what I mean? And then it took so much longer for it to recover out of that, you know? We're not fully recovered from it still. Mm-hmm. But it's a changing landscape, and I feel like it's an exciting landscape because it's power to the individual, to the music artist, but a much broader community with the technology. I feel like, and a benefit for individuals like us to each make a living, you know? It's so here's the positivity to the future.
That's right after the depression.
Yeah, we'll start making money and the asteroid will hit, then we'll be good to go. Well, thanks, man. I think we should wrap it up. Me. It's getting a little sweaty in here.
Yeah.
But thanks for
having me.
Talking.
And anytime. Some real interesting ideas and conversations.
Yeah. So your album's out now, and then you got the other one in the future.
Yeah. So I've got the one's out, and I actually found out about this. You called it this Canadian one, Indie
Pool.
Indie Pool.
Yeah, they're good guys.
And
they know their shit.
Are they located in Toronto?
Yeah, they're in the East End here, I believe. And yeah, they're pretty good guys. They same thing with them. They've been through a lot of trials and tribulations with this. I don't think they have quite the reach of what CD Baby and Indie Pool have, but it's like you can ask them a lot of questions and they'll point you in the right direction.
And I got to learn from you more about this idea about making my YouTube channel more monetize it more. So things to do.
I feel like I need to do some sort of seminar now with local artists, because it's like it's a powerful tool, and also I think a lot of I come from broadcasting and years of broadcasting. There's a few people that really get it, but there's so much power in making money in YouTube. It's insane. And it's like Canadians consume more YouTube than any country in the world. Like 90% of what we consume comes from YouTube. So it's like, why can't we benefit off it? And also there should be, there's another whole other topic, but it's like the CRTC needs to change and benefit creative Canadian content people.
That's always been a problem in Canada.
Yeah. So let's change that. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex.
Cheers. All right.
Cheers.
Good night, folks.